Hello and welcome to Peak Performance Selling, the only sales clinic in the Middle East. I'm Dr. Anand Menon, your host and sales doctor on this channel. Now, as you go through this channel, if you like some of the videos that you see here, I would encourage you to hit the like button and share it with your friends on your social media platforms. You see, I'm a firm believer that those who know have the moral responsibility to share with those who don't. So let's become ambassadors of knowledge and share what we learn with our friends. And I want to thank you in advance for doing that. On this video, I want to share with you an effective process in dealing with objections. Now, this is with the understanding that it is a real, relevant, and timely objection. I will be doing subsequent videos as well, in which we will talk about the different types of objections that come up. Another video on price objections alone. In fact, I'll do 3 videos on price objections. The first one would be why people object on price so much. The second would be what are price objection clarifiers that you can use. And the third would be a few techniques on dealing with price objections. But now let's look at the generic objection handling process, regardless of what the objection may be, right? So whatever objection is raised to you, there's a 7-step process that you should use. Now, I know, don't freak out. Sales guys just don't like these kind of numbers. They don't like anything that's lengthy. But let me assure you that the 7 steps happen so quickly, you'll do it all of it in less than 2 minutes. It's as simple as that. So let's look at the steps. Now, it might take longer on this video because this is training and I have to explain the rationale or the psychology behind the steps. So let's say a client raises an objection. Your price is too high, or I'm not convinced you can deliver this product by the deadline or by the date that you are giving me. The first thing in any objection is complement the objection. Complement the objection. You don't agree with the objection, you do not get defensive on the objection, but complement it. And there are many ways you could do that. I'm glad you brought that up. That's an interesting observation. Let's discuss that a little bit more, shall we? That's an interesting observation. This is obviously important to you. Valid concerns, so many different examples of what you could say. Just use any one of them, whichever one you're comfortable with. In some cases, you could even use good point. Just don't use it on a price objection. If a client tells you, I think your prices are too high, you're not going to sound very good if you say good point. Yeah, but you might want to use something like, I'm glad you brought that up. That's obviously important to you. Price is important to both you as well as me. So any of these could be used. Now, what's the psychology here? You see, every time a client raises an objection, whether the objection is real or not, in the client's mind, it is a concern. So the client feels it's a real concern. He may not have all the information. So his mind is closing out. Any answer that you give is going to go into a mind that's closing out. And why would you want to do that? So we need to stop the mind from closing and keep it open so that they are open to the response. And the best way to do that is to neutralize. I'm glad you brought that up. That's obviously important to you. We hear that from a lot of our happiest investors. Anything that you want, something that stops the mind from closing. Now, the second thing that you have to do is to make sure it is not a smoke screen. Now, in a previous video, I have discussed what are smoke screens and the psychology behind them. Watch that video and you will understand it. Basically, very quickly, a smoke screen is a fake objection. It hides the real objection. So the second step for you is to find out if that's the smoke screen. So you ask the first question, or you cancel out the objection by saying, I'm glad you brought that up. Is that the only thing stopping you from going ahead with this decision? Now, there's only yes or no answers to this one, you see. Now, if it is a fake objection or not a real objection or just a smoke screen, the client is never going to tell you yes. He's going to say, well, not exactly. Now, if the client says yes, then I'll show you what is step number 3. If the client says, well, not exactly, you simply have to ask a second question. Mr. Prospect, besides this, there seems to be some other concern. May I ask, what is it? And that's the one you're going to deal with. So the second step is to clarify what is the real objection. You first neutralize, keep the mind open, clarify, is this the only thing? Check if there's any other objection. Third, you need to probe. So when you probe, you would use the words that he has used. When you say our prices are too high, what exactly do you mean? When you say our prices are too high, who have you compared us with? When you say our prices are too high, what capabilities did you look at when you considered that? When you say our prices are too high, how high do you think we are? Anything. What you're trying to do is establish whether he has done the right kind of comparison, whether there is some sort of background, history, validity to his statement, or is it just perception at that moment? And you need to understand what is in the mind of the client before you give the answer. So simply ask. Now, once you have got that third one, you go to the fourth part, which is neutralize. So in the first case, you complimented. Step one is compliment or acknowledge it. The second step that you need to actually compliment is the first. It's the best way to remember it is compliment. Second, check if it's a smoke screen. Third, probe to clarify. The fourth, acknowledge. The acknowledgement statement must come before your answer. It's a softener statement. And an acknowledgement statement could be a very simple statement. Mr. Prospect, I understand, before you give your answer. Or Mr. Prospect, I can see why you feel like that at this point, before you give the answer. Or Mr. Prospect, many of our other customers felt the same way. Here's what they discovered. These are different kinds of softeners that you could use before you give the answer. See, a softener is important because you're going to give an answer. You want the mind of the person to be receptive. A softener opens their mind more to listen to you. So that's step number 4. I'll go through the first 4 steps again because it's important for us to remember them. You compliment the objection to keep the mind open, to stop it from closing. The second, you check if it's a smoke screen or check the validity or if there's anything else. The third, you probe to clarify. And the fourth, you acknowledge. Fair point. Many of our happiest investors felt the same way. And then you give them the answer. Here's what they found. What I like using is even a positive word here. Mr. Prospect, I know exactly how you feel. Many of our happiest investors felt the same way, but it actually surprised them to discover. You see, there's the word. It actually surprised them to discover. So what you're doing is, in your own nice way, telling him others felt like you, they were actually surprised when they discovered, which is a positive note that you could use here. It's a power word again, but it's a positive power word. So Mr. Prospect, I know exactly how you feel. Many of our other customers felt the same way, but it actually surprised them to discover. And then the fifth part is giving your answer. Now, I can't give the answer for you because I don't know the product that you sell. I don't know the type of objection that you're encountering. But whatever it is, you should be the professional with the answer. But don't just throw the answer when the objection comes up. Go through the sequence, because the sequence is a psychologically designed one that keeps the mind open, keeps the client engaged, keeps them listening to you and more open to receiving your answers. So step 5 would be providing the answer after you have acknowledged and used a power word. Like it actually surprised them to discover. But they realized very quickly any of these things. Basically, you're putting something that says that will make or set the mind for a positive reaction to your answer. Now, after you've given your answer, which is step 5, you go to step 6, and this I don't find salespeople doing. You see, it's such a powerful thing to do because it will actually lead you into a trial close straight away. After you've given your answer, always ask, does that answer your question? Some people even take it one step further. Does that answer your question satisfactorily? But I like to reduce the number of words that you use. Yeah? So you could do whichever one you're comfortable with. Mr. Prospect, does that answer your question? So you see, again, there's only a yes or no answer. One of the techniques you have to learn to use in questioning is a lockdown technique. A lockdown technique causes the clients to give you answers that are clear commitments, yes or no. In the qualifying and in the rapport building, when you need more information, go with open questions. But lockdown questions are very good questions. They're some of my favorite questions. So, Mr. Prospect, does that answer your question? Again, only 2 answers, yes, no, or maybe. Maybe is in the no bracket. If he says, well, yes, that does answer my question. Yeah, okay, that's fine. So how would you like to make the down payment? That's your trial close, step number 7. Now, you see, it's very difficult for the client to walk away from that at that moment because he just said, yes, you've answered my question. So which unit would you like to go for? Which option do you prefer? Option A or option B? So you can go with many different closing techniques, simple closing techniques, because the client said yes already. If the client says, well, not exactly, I'm still not convinced, again, you need to ask. But don't ask a negative question. What are you not convinced about? What you will ask is, what more would you need to be convinced? Or what would you like to know to be convinced? What more will help you be convinced? Any which way that works with you. Use your language, your sales personality. Basically, the idea is to get him to focus on the positive. What else would you like to know? And once that's done, you ask again, does that answer your question? Are you satisfied with the answer now? Are you okay with that? Whichever thing he says, then you know exactly you can go with the trial close. Now, some people in stage number 6, instead of saying, does that answer your question, they probe to see reaction. So some of them would use a question like, how do you feel about what I just said? Which is a great question to ask. Yeah, how do you feel about what I said? That will tell you their level of satisfaction, yes or no. In case you don't want to use a lockdown because you feel that your client may not like to commit to a yes or a no, you could simply ask him, oh, Mr. Prospect, how do you feel about what I just said? You see, in their answer, you will get your yes and no. So there are two ways of doing this, yeah? The lockdown, or you can give them a question through which their answer will tell you the yes or no, whether they are satisfied or not. And in both cases, you can end with a trial close. So how would you like to make the down payment? So let's finish the paperwork on this, shall we? So, or you could say, let's finish the paperwork so I can explain what happens next. Which option would you like to go for? You can use so many different closing techniques, which are subjects for other videos, of course. So let me summarize the 7 steps. You start by complimenting the client for the objection. Then you check if there's any other objection or if this is a smokescreen. Step 2. Step 3, you probe and clarify to know what's the real objection. 4, acknowledge and neutralize. Use a power word like it actually surprised them to discover. And 5, give your answer. 6, check for satisfaction. 7, go with the trial close. Try this and let me know how it worked for you. Good luck. Happy selling.